The end depends upon the beginning, so pour a libation to Hestia. A child of the immortals offers fire to the immortals. O blessed Hestia, mistress of fire and light, flesh of my soul, bring into my home your divine fire. Let my house partake of your wisdom, love, and power. O blessed Hestia, be welcome in my home. Alright, the gods are not angry with you. Don't believe me? Stick around with me through this video as we discuss chapter 14 of On the Gods in the World and come to an understanding of this concept. This has been in the past a frequent topic of conversation, and I have stated before on this channel about the view of some people I've encountered who view the gods as childish beings capable of all manner of moral degradation. So let's get into this. Starting off with the idea that the gods are immutable is a statement that raises a philosophical question of how they are capable of experiencing emotions such as joy or anger. If the nature of the gods is that they are unchanging, it would seem to be contradictory to suggest that they can rejoice in the good or be turned away from evil, as these would be reactions that imply an emotional response. For one to experience joy or aversion would imply that they are affected by external conditions, which conflicts with the concept that the divine is immutable, which is the view that the gods remain constant and unaffected by the material world. Furthermore, the view that the gods become angry with the guilty or they become pleased with proper worship presents a similar challenge. Anger and favor suggest emotional responses to human actions, which would imply that the disposition of the gods can change based on what we do here. But if they are immutable, their reactions would not differ in any way depending on human behavior. This brings the question of how the gods can interact with the material world in a way that aligns with both their immutability and the common beliefs that they are concerned with justice, the punishment of wrongdoing, and rewarding piety. To respond to the statement that the gods partake of emotions, we assert that the gods neither rejoice nor feel anger, because such emotions would imply a changeability and susceptibility to external influence. To say that they rejoice suggests they experience joy, which stands to reason that they also carry the potential for sorrow when the circumstances are changed. If a being is capable of rejoicing, it is also linked and subject to the opposite emotion, that being sorrow, since both are reactions to external circumstances. However, to label such emotional fluctuations to the gods contradicts the very nature of the divine, which we understand to be perfect, unchanging, and independent of external circumstances. In a similar manner, anger is an emotional response that arises when expectations are not met or when justice is not upheld. If the gods were capable of anger, this would suggest that the divine can be provoked or disturbed by our actions and the actions of others. This implies that the divine nature is not self-sufficient. To ascribe anger to the gods is to make them vulnerable to external factors, which suggests a type of imperfection. This view conflicts with the very definition and understanding of divinity as transcendent, unchanging, and perfect, beyond the reach of the disturbances that affect human beings. Therefore, the gods do not experience emotions such as joy or anger in the way that we do here in the material world. Rather than being subject to the fluctuation of emotion, the gods remain constant and undisturbed. The gods are not influenced by the shifting tides of human actions or events in our world, because their perfection lies in their immutability. Any perception that we have of divine favor or anger toward us should not be understood as emotional reactions, but rather as reflections of the eternal and unchanging nature of the divine. This interpretation preserves the idea that the gods uphold justice and order without compromising their perfect and unchangeable nature, by attributing to them emotions that belong to corporal and imperfect beings. Similarly, the idea that the gods are capable of being appeased with gifts or offerings implies that the gods are capable of experiencing delight or pleasure from these acts, which also implies an emotional changeability. If the gods were influenced by gifts, this would mean that their favor or blessings could be swayed by external material acts, suggesting that they derive pleasure or satisfaction from our offerings, as suggested in Hollywood movies. Such a view implies that the divine is in some way lacking or in need of something outside of themselves, which can be fulfilled through human offerings. However, this view takes away the transcendence of divinity by making it dependent on external circumstances, thereby introducing a form of emotional need or dependency and tying their existence to our very own. The very idea of divine immutability stands in opposition to the idea that the gods can be appeased or swayed by gifts. If divinity were subject to delight in response to offerings, it would mean that the gods' very state of being could be changed by human action, introducing a form of imperfection into their nature. True divinity, however, as we have already stated, is characterized by its self-sufficiency and unchanging perfection, and remains unaffected by the material and emotional conditions of the world. The giving of gifts or offerings does not appease the gods in the sense of moving their favor, but can instead be understood as acts of devotion that align the worshipper, which would be us, with the divine order, without implying that the gods themselves are emotionally influenced by these very gestures. It is not fitting that the nature of the gods should be affected in any way by human concerns. To say otherwise is to suggest that the gods are influenced by the finite affairs of mortal beings. Divinity, by its very essence, is believed to transcend the limitations and fluctuations of our mortal world. To say that the gods are emotionally linked to human actions implies that the gods are susceptible to the imperfections and disturbances that characterize our human condition. If the gods could be swayed by human concerns, it would no longer be an independent, self-sufficient force, but rather a reactive entity which contradicts the very conception of divine nature. The relationship between human action and the response of the gods must therefore be understood in a way that does not compromise the unchanging and eternal nature of the gods. If the gods were subject to feeling joy when we humans act virtuously or sorrow when we behave unjustly, this would imply that the nature of the gods is bound by the same emotional fluctuations that govern human life. But divinity, by definition, should not be entangled in the emotions and changes that are inherent to our human existence. The gods must remain above these shifting conditions, operating from a place of absolute balance and untouched by the frailty and uncertainty that affect mankind. Moreover, to suggest that the nature of the gods can be affected by human concerns implies a form of dependency, wherein the gods would be reliant on us for their emotional or spiritual state. This is an absurd view because it would diminish the sovereignty and independence of the divine. A truly divine nature must be complete within itself, free from the need to respond emotionally to factors outside of itself. If the gods were in any way influenced by the moral successes or failures of mankind, this would introduce an element of changeability and imperfection into the god's nature, which contradicts the concept of divine perfection. Therefore, the relationship between the gods and mankind is not one in which the gods are emotionally or spiritually affected by human concerns. Instead, the gods remain a constant, unchanging source of order, justice, and goodness. The actions of humans may be judged or weighed according to divine principles, but these actions do not disturb or influence the gods themselves. In this way, the divine maintains its purity and immutability, while still upholding the laws that govern the universe. Human concerns may affect the human realm, but the divine remains eternally beyond these limitations. The gods, by their very nature, are inherently and perpetually good and beneficial, and their influence is always positive, regardless of how we perceive it. This perpetual goodness is not subject to fluctuation or change, as the gods exist in a state of eternal perfection. Unlike humans, who are prone to inconsistency and moral failings, because the gods are always good, their presence in the world is continuously profitable to those who seek to align themselves with their divine order. They are not harmful because their essence does not allow it. Unlike mankind, the gods are entirely uniform and unchanging, while mortals experience a range of emotions and are influenced by the fluctuating circumstances of our lives. The gods subsist in a constant state of equilibrium. Their nature is stable, eternal, and unaffected by the chaos and variability that characterize the human existence. This uniformity of the divine ensures that the gods remain reliable and ever-present forces of good within the cosmos. Their actions and influence do not originate from emotional reactions or shifting perspectives, but rather from their eternal essence, which is always aligned with virtue. When we, as mortal beings, are good, we become conjoined with the gods through a form of likeness. Goodness, in this context, is not merely a human trait, but a reflection of attributes of the divine. To be good is to align oneself with the order and principles that the gods represent. Through our own efforts toward virtue and moral excellence, we draw closer to the gods, sharing in their immutable and perfect nature. This connection is not physical but spiritual, as we strive to emulate the consistency and goodness and virtue that define the gods. The more we cultivate these qualities within ourselves, the more we become united within the divine order, transcending the imperfections of the human condition. Thus, the process of becoming good is, in essence, a process of becoming more divine. By cultivating virtue and aligning our actions with virtue, we enter into a state of harmony with the divine, participating in the same order and goodness that the gods embody. This likeness allows us to experience a form of unity with the divine, drawing us closer to the eternal and perfect nature of the gods. Through this connection, we are uplifted and purified, moving beyond the limitations of the human imperfection toward the higher state of being. When we turn to evil, we are separated from the gods through dissimilitude. Evil, in this context, is understood as a departure from the divine order, goodness that the divine represents, while the gods are immutable, perfectly good, and constant in their very nature. Humans, due to their imperfect and changeable nature, can deviate from this path of divine order. When we embrace evil, either through immoral actions, unjust behavior, or selfish and basic desires, we stray from the likeness of the divine. This dissimilitude creates a spiritual distance between ourselves and the gods, as evil is fundamentally opposed in the absence of the divine. The more we indulge in vice, the more we alienate ourselves from the divine order and harmony, placing ourselves outside the realm of goodness and removing ourselves from the God's blessings. Living according to virtue is the key to partaking in the essence of the gods. Virtue is an expression of goodness, justice, and moral excellence, aligns us with the qualities of the gods, allowing us to share and partake in the divine nature. When we act virtuously, we mirror the consistency and purity of the divine, bringing in connection with the gods through our moral conduct. In this state of being, we partake of the gods in a spiritual sense, as our souls are elevated and brought into harmony with the higher, unchanging order of the cosmos. Virtue not only brings us closer to the gods, but also enables us to experience the benefits and blessings of divine favor, such as inner peace, wisdom, and a sense of unity with the cosmos. This alignment with the gods strengthens our character and leads us to a life of fulfillment and purpose. However, when we become evil, we allow our souls to become inverted. We cause the gods to become our enemies, not in the concept that the gods seek to cause us harm, but in that we place ourselves in opposition to their divine and eternal principles, the gods being the embodiment of perfect goodness and evil being the absence of good. There can be no unity. By engaging in wickedness, we allow our soul to fall out of alignment and into a state of conflict with the divine order. As our actions are at odds with the virtue that the gods uphold, in this way, it is not the gods that change or develop feelings of animosity toward us. Rather, it is us who put ourselves in positions where we are in opposition to their nature, which leads to what we perceive to be punishment. The gods remain constant, but it is our own moral degradation that causes us to experience their justice as opposition, as we become out of sync with the harmony of the universe. This means that the idea of the gods becoming our enemies is a reflection of our own choices. When we choose to live a life of virtue, we align ourselves with the gods, elevating ourselves to their goodness and enjoying the peace and benefits that come with such harmony. But when we choose evil, we break this connection, and the consequences of our actions lead us into a state of spiritual disharmony, where we experience the natural consequences and repercussions of being out of alignment with the divine. The gods, in their perfect justice, cannot favor those who act unjustly, and in this way they seem to become angered with us, though it is truly our own separation from goodness that brings about this conflict. In essence, our relationship with the gods is determined by the choices we make. When we act in accordance with virtue, we draw near to them, partaking in their goodness and experiencing the fruits of life lived in harmony with the divine. But when we turn to evil, we sever this connection, distance ourselves from the gods, and create a state of opposition. This serves as a reminder that cultivating virtue is required to remain aligned with the gods and to avoid the self-inflicted consequences of moral disintegration. It is imperative to understand that when we experience the consequences of our guilt or wrongdoing, it is not because the gods are angry with us. Divine anger is not the cause of our suffering. Instead, guilt itself acts as a barrier that prevents us from receiving the illumination and blessings that naturally flow from the gods. The gods, by their very nature, are perpetually good, radiant, and generous. However, when we commit wrongs, we create a spiritual blockage within ourselves. This blockage does not affect the gods or change their nature, but it prevents us from being receptive to the divine light and guidance that they continuously offer. Guilt clouds our soul, making us unable to receive the wisdom and virtue that the gods provide, creating a barrier between us and their presence. Furthermore, guilt subjects us to the influences of avenging daemons or spirits, forces that operate according to the natural laws of justice and retribution. These daemons are not the embodiment of divine anger, but rather agents of cosmic justice. They function within the order of the universe to ensure that balance and harmony is maintained. When we engage in wrongdoing, it is these spirits that take over, bringing about the consequences of our actions in the form of suffering or misfortune. This is not because the gods actively punish us, but because we removed ourselves from their presence and have placed ourselves under the jurisdiction of these forces through our own guilt and wrongdoing, our own actions. The gods, who are inherently good and just, remain constant, while our moral failings subject us to the inevitable repercussions. When we seek to free ourselves from the guilt through prayers and sacrifices, we do not appease the gods in the sense of calming our perceived anger or causing them to change their disposition toward us. The gods, being immutable and perfect, do not require appeasement because they are not emotionally affected by our human actions. Our prayers and sacrifices are not meant to change the gods, their state, or influence them in any way, as their goodness and justice are already complete and unchanging. Instead, these acts of devotion serve to purify our own souls, removing the guilt and spiritual barriers that prevent us from receiving the illumination of the gods. By engaging in sincere prayer and making sacrifices, we realign ourselves with the divine order and open ourselves up once again to the flow of the divine energy within our own lives. This process of seeking pardon for ourselves through spiritual acts is about transformation within ourselves, not about changing the gods. Through these acts, we cleanse our souls, dissolve the guilt that has clouded our spiritual vision, and reestablish the harmony between ourselves and the divine. The gods remain constant throughout. It is we who must undergo the necessary transformation to reconnect with the goodness. By removing the guilt that separates us from the divine, we restore our receptivity to their illumination, allowing us to partake once again in the virtues and blessings that they bestow. Therefore, the process of reconciliation between us and the divine is not about influencing or changing the gods, but about changing ourselves. Prayers and sacrifices are tools for our own purification, designed to clear away the moral and spiritual obstructions that prevent us from experiencing their divine presence. In this way, we restore the natural connection between ourselves and the gods, who are ever present and always willing to illuminate us with their goodness, provided we are capable of receiving it. By engaging in spiritual practices such as prayers, sacrifices, and other methods of devotion, we do not change the gods themselves, but instead we are addressing our own vices. These practices serve as remedies for the corruption and disorder caused by our actions. By utilizing them, we begin a process of purification, allowing us to once again become able to receive the goodness of the gods. This is an act of aligning our own being with the eternal and virtuous principles that the gods embody. In doing so, we begin to restore our capacity to receive the divine blessings that we have previously blocked through our actions. It is through our own spiritual renewal that we reestablish our connection with the gods. This process is not about altering the gods, but about reorienting ourselves to their divine goodness. The gods, in their perfection, are always shining their grace and wisdom upon the world, much like the sun continually radiates light. However, just as one who is blind is not capable of perceiving the sun, those who are separated from the divine due to their vice cannot experience the illumination of the gods. The gods do not withdraw their goodness or turn away from evil, but rather it is we who turn away from them through our actions. In a state of spiritual darkness, we are unable to perceive or benefit from the divine radiance that is always present. Thus, when we undergo the spiritual reawakening and remedy our faults, it is similar to restoring our sight, allowing us to once again be illuminated by the divine presence. To say that the divine turns away from evil is therefore an incorrect way of understanding the relationship between the gods and man's actions. The gods do not change in response to our actions, and are always good as they are constant. It is more accurate to say that when we commit evil, we separate ourselves from the gods and their light. Like we have established, the separation is not due to change in the gods, but to the moral blindness we impose upon ourselves through our own vices. In this sense, claiming that the gods turn away from the wicked is just like saying that the sun hides itself from those who are blind. The sun continues to shine, but those without sight are unable to experience its light. Just as the goodness of the gods is always present, it is up to those who have blinded themselves to correct their shortcomings. Ultimately, the process of returning to the gods through spiritual purification is about removing the obstacles within ourselves that prevent us from experiencing the divine grace. It is like removing a blindfold that we have placed upon ourselves. By overcoming our vices and realigning ourselves with the virtues that mirror the divine nature, we open ourselves once again to the flow of the blessings of the gods. Just as a blind person who regains their sight can once again perceive the sun, a soul that is purified through prayer and sacrifices can once again receive the illumination of the gods. The gods are always present, unchanging in their benevolence, but it is up to us to cleanse and purify our souls that we may once again stand in their light. All right, I hope this explanation from chapter 14 of On the Gods in the World has helped you to understand perceived anger from the gods a little better. Let me know in the comments below what you think. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and share this video so that it may help someone else. Now, a reminder for everyone listening, there is now an Echoes from the Temple private Facebook community as well as the Discord community, which are both free to join, and you can find both in my link tree in the description below. Also, if you are a devout practitioner of a pagan tradition or a practitioner of a magical tradition and would like to explain how it has changed your life, I would like to help you share your story here on this channel, just as I have been sharing stories of the neophytes within the Church of Thessaly. So if that is you, contact me in any manner you want down in my link tree below. And until next time, Salate.